forward, BJ, and ready to have some fun today. And we are live. I actually have it running over here and mute so I can see that we're streaming pretty well. So tell us a little bit about what we're doing today.
Yeah, we're taking a little bit of a departure today, but I think a good one. Um, and this is it's unique in that I don't know Diane Williams real well. I came across a couple of comments which made me click on her profile. We had some really interesting mutual friends in volleyball, and I don't want to date us too badly, but I mean it's the Kessel, Cecile, Rod Wild, Tom Sorensen's in there, and I thought, okay. So then I poked around a little bit more and just was looking into Diane's background. I thought it just she just sounds like an interesting person to have on, and in the last 15 minutes that we've been uh, you know, speaking before the podcast, I realize that's definitely going to be the case. So let's get Diane in here
Yeah,
and
we had a
start
little
talking.
pre-discussion last evening, and don't get her started on Tom Selleck stories, or you'll be here a while. So that's good. Let's get her in here.
Yeah, a
Yeah,
little
but he
volleyball
pulled
history.
a lot of cash out of his pocket and handed it to
Yeah,
me.
yeah,
Like, come
We
on.
got to hear about some Tom
yeah.
Selleck
We'll
stuff.
get there.
We get into that. So probably the first thing we ask everybody, Diane, is what was your entry into volleyball? And I know yours is going to be interesting and fun to hear about. So just tell us how you kind of got into the sport and where you went from there.
Well, I grew up in the Virgin Islands, lived on St. Croix, went to a small private school, and I lettered in 7 sports in high school because you played everything. You know, when volleyball season was over, then there was basketball season, and then there was tennis season, and there was softball, or whatever. And not that I was any good at any of them, but I always set nets up behind our classrooms so people could play at break and lunch. And I have no idea what height they were, but it was jungle ball. And then our own team played competitively, was jungle ball. So we just didn't have a coach that didn't know anything about it. So I just learned by watching others, the Olympics, when I saw them on television, and um, I, I couldn't even tell. I used to ride horses, um, all sorts of things. Probably riding horses kept me from doing a lot of a lot of other stuff. When I went to college, I tried out as a walk on, and I was on it when I was my first year, and then the coach said, I don't have enough uniforms for you for the following year, so I got cut for the lack of a uniform. Although the players had told me, we wish you were on the team because you were a really good setter. So,
It's sort of like the Chris Marlowe story. It sounds familiar to me.
oh really? Yeah,
Oh
I know.
yeah, Marlowe, everybody wanted him on the team, and then unfortunately, our mutual friend Rod Wild broke his leg, and that's how Marlowe got on the team in '84.
And he was the captain, which he will
He
never
made
hesitate.
him the captain right away. Yeah,
Hmm. Yeah, but that's
yeah,
great. That's cool. You got to have at least 2 setters. You can't practice without 2 setters.
yeah.
So then after college, I majored in phys ed, and I quickly discovered that me teaching in a classroom setting with 60 kids and very little equipment at the place where I tried to teach for one semester wasn't for me. Maybe if I'd gone to the other high school where they had 5 teachers and all the curriculum was already laid out before you and you just did what you were told, it was, I don't know if that would have worked or not. But I loved watching the Bullets on TV, the Washington Bullets, and I ended up at Wes Unseld's camp in August of 77. And as a matter of fact, Wes Unseld and I were chatting in his room and the radio was on, and that's when we heard Elvis had died, August 16th, 1977. And so I met Kevin Greavy and Mike Reardon and Mitch Kupchak, and Kevin gave me tickets when they were available. So I'm driving from Winchester to Landover, Maryland. It's about 75, 80 miles to see Bullets games. in the fall of 77. And then spring, January 78, I started working on a master's degree in sports psychology at the University of Maryland. So I'm still, watching like women's volleyball at Maryland was in the fall, but mostly basketball. That was my thing at the time. And then I was taking a sports psychology class where I was doing tracking what people's free throw percentages were depending on what the score was. Like more than 10 behind, 9-6
Yeah.
behind, 5-0 behind, ahead, and on to see if those situations made a difference in people's free throw shooting percentage. And the uh, media guy with the Bullets loved statistics and stuff like that. So he gave me a press pass to sit on the court watching Bullets games, taking my stats, and I did it like a grid. So I had one team on one side, one team on the other, and then I just had little clues as to, what was happening, who did the assist, who made the layup, who got the rebound, put it back in, just things that were kind of like what they were sitting there typing out for the media, the play by play. And I had years later, I had the sports information director would come over and say, Diane, who made this shot? Did you get that? And I said, oh yeah, that was so and so. He said, thank you, because they'd missed it. So, well, they came to me to find out.
I
And
know two
well,
guys that did that exact same job on air for the NBA, and
mhm,
they have all the stuff in their head for
yeah,
it,
Marty
and they
Aronson
talk about handing
was
notes over.
our local guy for Bullets for the Washington Redskins, the Redskins at the time. Yeah, he was this master statistician for the pro sports. And I don't think he did baseball, but he did basketball and football. And um, volleyball wasn't my big thing at the moment, but uh, after during the playoffs, this is how it stumbled, literally fell into sports writing because they couldn't justify giving me a spot at the press table for my little college project. I got a press pass from the Winchester Evening Star, and
Hmm.
now I'm living in College Park, Maryland, so I'm close. And I covered them in the playoffs, just the home games. I didn't travel anywhere, but I lived in New Carrollton, and a lot of the teams stayed at the New Carrollton, the hotel there, and I'd pop into the lobby. And I mean, all right, I love Pete Maravich. I fell in love with him when I was in high school, and the Vitalis dry control commercials and floppy hair, floppy socks, and magic fingers, magic hands. I met his dad, who was a scout, Press Maravich, and I chatted with him. And I even gave him a ride to the airport. He says, I'd rather pay you $20 than a taxi. I said, thank you, because I need that $20. And then I was watching the New Orleans Jazz. Gail Goodrich and Pete Maravich were playing Pong in the lobby of the Ramada Inn in New Carrollton. And I was chatting with Elgin Baylor about, jobs that were available for, someone like me, which would at that time only be in the front office as a secretary or whatever.
Right,
Just
right.
so that's how I stumbled into sports writing. And I did my last article. I had to watch the final because it was in Seattle on TV at home, but because it was an afternoon paper, then I could write it and phone it in the next morning. Um,
Wow, that's cool. That's
and
uh, that's a
and I
wild
couldn't
journey.
write. I was not a
Yeah.
very good writer. My English teacher in 12th grade said I'd never write better than a B paper. And I'm going at the time, well, that's above average. What's so bad about that? Uh,
So how did you jump from, I mean, you're doing NBA stuff. How'd you jump from there into volleyball? How did that, because I know you have a good volleyball history, you've been all over the country doing volleyball stuff. How did that transition happen?
in the early 80s, I was playing co-ed rec league volleyball, and some of the guys were on the club team at George Mason. And so then I would go watch, they'd kind of go back and forth between the club and the varsity. And um, so I started watching them. I'd watch the women in the fall and the men in the spring, and uh, just started learning. Coach Wayne Stolick, who developed the program at George Mason, bless his heart, let me tag along. Even worked me into the budget. Most of the times I'd pay my own way. Like if we went to New Jersey Tech or um, Rutgers, because they're literally right across Rutgers, Newark. They're across the street from each other. I would ride along with them. I'd pay for my own accommodations. Um, but they felt a value in me taking pictures. And so when the Washington Star folded in 1981, I thought, well, I'd still like to try to stay into sports writing. And, if I'm going to go to a small local paper, you got to do the photography, you got to do the writing, you got to do the editing, you got to do the layout, you got to do everything. And my dad gave me a couple of cheap little Ricoh cameras and 50 millimeter lenses. And when I'm sitting at the press table for the Bullets games, I'm sitting next to Dr. Reed Tuckson, who was a dentist, and he taught at Howard University. And he did a lot. Dentists do things with X-raying and stuff like that. But he's a photographer for the African American newspaper, and he taught me how to take pictures. He said, like, focus on the rim, easiest thing you want to do. You got a wide lens there, so focus on the rim and kind of wait for the action to come to you. And then he had a dark room in his basement, and he taught me how to develop black and white film. And the 6th frame on the first roll of film I shot was of Kevin Greavy doing a reverse layup around Marvin Webster and Maurice Lucas of the New York Knicks, which he sank.
Lucas. Love that guy.
Huge. These guys are like, 6'8", 6'6", Kevin 6'5". And it was his favorite picture of himself as a pro, because it was different. I had a different seat from all the other photographers, because where they sit is on the floor under the basket. Majority of players are right-handed, so that's why they sit to, as they're facing the other end of the court, that's why they sit to the right of the basket, because they won't get people's arms in their faces when they're shooting. But I had a unique spot. And, I fluked my way into everything. One thing led to another, but I took advantage of it. So then I start taking pictures of the guys playing volleyball. So my first tournament was down at Old Dominion, and the club team and the varsity were there. And one of my favorite volleyball pictures that I ever took was Joe Worth was a setter on the club team, and Keith Hartranft was the middle. And I got a picture from behind Joe, but setting, and the ball is just leaving his hands, and Keith is up in the air with his arm cranked back. And it was beautiful. So I'm going, damn, I could do this. And then I got another picture of the same tournament. Rick Lucas, who was our All-American setter on the varsity, I can't even illustrate it because my neck is fused and I can't tilt my head as far back. But it's, it's like the blooper photos, like the funny animal pictures. Is Rick is setting a back set and his head is so far back you can't see it.
Can't see him.
Okay. And then I fell into, as I started to travel with the team, I was like their, not manager, but just a coach's assistant. I would phone in the score if they wanted, like a highlight or a little headline, then I could do that. So that's to the Washington Post. And I really learned, like I said, I can tell you what happened. I don't necessarily know why, but the key thing I would want to tell people coming into sports writing now, high school, whatever, don't be like a lawyer who doesn't ask a question to his client without knowing what the answer is going to be. You don't want that attitude. Because you might ask the coach, like, well, I think I know why, but I need him to say it so I can quote the coach. And then he'll come up with something you're not expecting, and that's gold. So approach it sincerely, like you don't know the answer. And hopefully you'll get gold. Like, don't go in like, I just got to get him to say it. My brother lived near Atlanta, and he worked for a radio station, and he started covering Atlanta Hawks games and all the major sports for radio snippets. And he later worked for Westwood One and did, the Olympics and the Falcons and everything. But when he started doing that, and one of the first things he was going to do was go to Atlanta Hawks game. And I had talked with Hubie during the playoffs, and all my questions were from ignorance. Hey, what do you do this, or what do you do that, or what's this, what's that? He loved it. He would sit down and talk with me. I'd be the only reporter there, and I really had no business being there. But I could see he hated like the philosophical stuff. Like, will the sun come up for the Hawks tomorrow? And he would just stare at somebody. And then he would look around and he'd go, now, does anybody have a basketball question? So I didn't want Fred to get blackballed on his very first assignment. So I told him this. I said, make sure you ask him something basketball technical. And so his first time in the Atlanta Hawks locker room, he's looking around, and the beat reporter from the Journal Constitution asked one of those verboten questions, and Hubie just looked at him and looked around and said, does anybody have a basketball question? So Fred never asked him anything in the presence of the other reporters. But he went up to him afterwards and said, hi, I'm Fred Williams. Diane Williams covers, the Washington Bullets. So she's my sister. And Hubie goes, she asked the best questions of anybody covering the NBA. I'm going, oh, Jesus. But that was him. That was Hubie. You can like BS around with some of the other coaches who like that other stuff, but he was always this X's and O's guys. So that's what I tried to take in, when I went to the, we went to the NCAA Final Four in Los Angeles in 84 and 85. And I was sitting on the bench taking pictures. Again, I had a unique angle that no one else had. And I wasn't involved with interviewing people specifically at the time, but I would talk to the coaches afterwards. So,
Was that on the
if I had
women's side or the men's side that you were doing
men,
that? The
the
men.
men, the men. Yeah, I never
Yeah.
went anywhere with the women. I'd cover them when they were at home, but I wouldn't travel to watch them.
Yeah.
Because,
So you got to
short
see some of
shorts.
the, you got to see a lot of the Al Skates
Oh,
days.
yes. Yeah. And I love how men's volleyball coaches in particular, and probably women's too, appreciate the skills of their opponents. And, they have to center their defense or their offense around the skills of their opponents. And, we had a few good players back then. Moyo Kasim from Nigeria, he was a four-time All-American. And Rick Lucas, his last 3 years, he played as a grad student in 85. He's only 5'9", but he could jump out of the gym, and he had laser sharp setting skills.
Right.
And, and then the Hughes brothers that grew up playing beach volleyball, Rehoboth, they were great defensively. Like John didn't get to go, but Willie did. And so, yeah, I just kind of stumbled into this. It's almost like cheating. And if I think back on it, it's like, should I feel guilty? And I said,
And
no.
you were there for the UV years too, for the Uvaldo Acosta
Oh
years. I
my
mean,
God. You see all this gray hair? That's all from Uvaldo Acosta. I loved him to death, but I was just talking to Alan Knight last night after we played at Long Beach, and he introduced me to one of his assistant coaches and told me, all our mutual Uvaldo stories. He was doing something at junior nationals, and Alan, it's all this loud music was playing from the hotel room, and he goes down the door and bangs on the door, and UV goes, and UV's dancing around, and he looks at Alan, and he goes, oh, too loud. But Valdo could light up the gym. I won't name names, but I would murder a certain national team coach the next time I saw him for
Yeah.
cutting him from the 92 Olympic team. He lights up the floor. He always betters the ball. He will run after everything. I went out and visited with him. I don't remember if it was 91. I think it might have been 91 February, and went to the practices, they had in the Balboa Park iceberg, igloo. It was cold. People don't realize how cold it is in San Diego in the winter.
Can be.
Yeah. Oh, UV lived with this guy, and he refused to turn the heat on, trying to save money. And the players had to wash their own practice clothes
Yeah.
at home. And they didn't have a dryer. They had this old fashioned wringer washer. The wringer was on top in the tub, open tub of water. So he'd rinse out his clothes and he'd run them through the wringer. And then at night, he'd open the oven door. They had a gas oven. He'd open the oven door, crank up the oven, and he'd drape his clothes on a chair and put it next to the oven. Come on, people. But that's what he had to do. It was
And
crazy.
these are some of our heroes that had to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, and then all the players back then, they had to work other jobs. I think Bob Stvertlik worked in a bank and don't
Yeah.
remember what everybody else did. Like some people worked in real estate development or something like that, or sales, or I don't know. But yeah, so I'm, you drive me nuts. We, we people were, I, I think they were teasing me more than they were teasing Uvaldo about like he left his uniform shirt in the hotel room. And I said, well, we better go back and get it because, not going to win the match without Uvaldo playing. But it turns out, it was there. But I think they were definitely pulling my chain.
Yeah. Well, and then he spent further time at George Mason as a coach.
Yes, he hadn't graduated yet. He went out and he was on the national team for several years. He was best digger in the world at the World Cup, and then he doesn't make the Olympic team. I was in tears. I called Kirk Kilgore because he had been doing color on TV for games, and I'd met him several times, and I'm going, how the hell could that happen? And he said, well, you know what? I kind of saw it coming, but I think because UV had a lot of injuries, like his ligament in his knees and his shoulder. When he had surgery on his right shoulder, he played left-handed. And so I was talking to him on the phone one day. I said, well, if you're going to jump serve left-handed and hit left-handed, make sure you change your footwork because you don't want to be a goofy-footed left-handed hitter. UV was a dancer when he was a kid and a gymnast, and that was nothing to him to just learn new choreography. And he could pound the bleep out of the ball left-handed. And he learned how to do that because he learned how to play volleyball with his sisters. So he didn't want to hit it that hard or as hard as he could right-handed. He could still crush it left-handed, but that's how he learned how to hit left-handed as a kid because he learned how to play from his older sisters.
I wonder
So,
if I wonder if that '92 team could have handled having both Bob Samuelson and Uvaldo Acosta on it. I don't know if those two guys could have
no,
coexisted.
Sammy really respected. He was crushed. A lot of people uh, talked to me after UV died, and they were crushed. And they were also crushed. I mean, I didn't get along that well with Steve Timmons because we were at we were at a USVBA tournament one time, and a bunch of us who were friends with Uvaldo were rooting for him and against the other team that Timmons was on. And Timmons just turned around and yelled at us to shut up. I'm going, you don't tell us to shut up when we're rooting for UV. I'm sorry. And so I attended, several, like I said, several of the practices um, in San Diego. But then Timmons was the one that they interviewed for Volleyball Monthly after he got cut and said, you hate seeing somebody like that get cut from the team. So, props to him for saying that. But
It
yeah,
comes
like,
down to numbers at some point, right? I mean, it's a numbers game. Everybody's good. It's Hugh was just talking about this on Terry Pettit's podcast about how the first 8 or 9 people that you keep are gonna play, and then you
mhm,
got to keep a couple of glue players, and maybe they're not even as good as the players that you cut, but they fit the team. They're close. They fit the team. They hold the team together, and they hold that position of 10th or 11th or 12th best player. And I have a hard time, as you do, believing that UV wasn't in those top 8. But
well, he,
you know,
is he a liability on the front row for his blocking? He touched a lot of balls, and he would be very
yeah,
frustrated that the people behind him couldn't pick them up. He could pick up their touches,
yeah,
but then he was a brilliant defender. So, I mean, at the very worst, if they just put him in across the back row like they did Eric Sato just once a game,
yeah.
and if the rules were then what they are now, he'd easily be a libero.
He'd be there, bro. Yep.
No, and he would hate not being able to hit, but he was the glue, but he was also epoxy, man. He glued them together really well. And the several players that were kept in order to give them experience for the next quadrennial. all of those players that he kept instead of UV dropped the national team like a hot potato and went to play beach and were never seen again in a national team uniform. Now, would that have been UV's last, only Olympics? Probably, because of his nagging little injuries. But,
It
would
was
they
a
have
tough
gotten the
transition.
bronze? Oh, can you imagine if everything happened the way it happened? I'm trying to think of Uvaldo with a shaved head. He's a team player. He would have done it, but oh my word, can you see that? Maybe that wouldn't even happen, just that one like
Maybe.
butterfly effect.
Yeah.
Yeah. But he died swimming with the team
Right.
on February 12th, 1998. And UV didn't swim. He didn't like to swim. He could swim. I mean, he'd only go into a hot tub or an ice tub if he had to for physical reasons. He never got in the pool. He certainly didn't go out in the ocean that much. And, the guy's like 99% non-fat. So, what's he going to use to float? But
Right.
he went out there because he's a team player and he wanted to do team things. And it didn't work out so well for
Yeah.
him.
That was pretty tragic. Um, Losing him. I know it set George Mason back a little bit. It sent waves through volleyball as well because he had been a pretty popular guy. Like you said, he was a glue to a lot of different things, not just the national team, but
Mhm.
he was a great coach, and people really liked him. So
He
so
did
that was
one thing. I can't remember if it was his first or second year as head coach at Mason because he worked with the women's team. He was an assistant for Pat Kendrick with the women's team. And then when Wayne finally retired, and I think Ron Shaka finally retired, I think that's when he switched over to being in the admin side. Uh, we had a setter from Canada, Chris Iglesias, and I don't think he was, yeah, he wasn't left handed, he was right handed. But for a while, UV had him set from the left. So
yeah,
you mirror image. So,
yep,
and I don't even think we had a middle hitter that was left handed, but he said the reason he did that is because he wanted people to think more and,
yeah.
and be more aware of what they were doing and where they were. And so I don't recall how long that lasted, but um, it would all, it's
Whenever
throw a monkey wrench into the other team's defense too.
whenever that reverse 6-2 or the left side 6-2 comes up, it's the first thing that comes up. George Mason in the 90s with Uvaldo coaching. It's the very first example, at least in the United States, of
Hmm.
people that had ever heard of such a this wild thing that happened. And a lot of people have obviously done it since, but
I'm
that's
not even aware of that. Yeah.
that's the gold standard. Yeah, that was groundbreaking to a great degree.
And I
Yeah.
have no
Um,
idea where he came up with that, but maybe he saw somebody else do it. I don't know, but I just remember that he did that. I don't think it lasted too terribly long. I don't know if it lasted the whole season or not, but I'd have to ask some of the guys.
I just like the
Um,
thinking behind it, though, the idea of making them think. And I actually ran that. I ran that when I was told you couldn't do it in less than a season, and my team did it in 3 weeks, and they taught me a lot about it because as they were doing it, they were asking, "Hey, coach, could we do this? Could we do that?" So I love the idea that he was saying, I'm trying to get you to think. Because my experience with it was, yeah, they did start to think and they came up with things on their own and it got them to be more creative. And I think that's something I try to get my teams to do. It doesn't always happen, but it's kind of fun when it does.
well, especially if you're out of system and you can run things from the left side of the court and it's not such a shock. But I think that's good if you have a great right-handed setter who can crank on the ball when they're in the front row. I think they ran a 5-1, so Gletus was the 5-1 setter. Um, but yeah, that's, and especially if you do have somebody that's tall and left-handed, like a good friend of mine, Pat Corzine, was married to Dave Corzine of the Bullets, and she came out of Chicago, and she was a really great USVBA player. We actually played against her team. I stumbled upon a gold medal for USVBA in New York in 1985. Again, I'm sorry, it just how it happened. I was out in March when Mason went out to play like Pepperdine, UCLA, whatever, whoever we played out there. And I was on the beach and met some people. And um, she had a, oh, darn, I'm just gone brain dead on her name. Um, but she had, was it Robin Irwin Sutherland? She broke her leg, and they were going to be a hot contender for women's senior gold. And senior age was 30 and above.
Yeah,
And
at
so I
that
said,
time. Yeah.
yeah, at that time, yeah. So I'm going to go to New York anyway. I'm just going to be up there, not affiliated with a team. I'm going to go watch. I'm going to take pictures, and if you need another body on the bench, I can do that. So, is it okay? So I got with them. I slept on the floor of somebody else's room. I wasn't even with any of them. And as a matter of fact, I was late to one of the matches because my alarm didn't go off or something. But I played across the back row during pool play. I got an ace, had a couple nice passes and a dig. Thank you very much. And then we won. We came out of the losers bracket and we won.
I'm
And
so glad to hear that that I played adult nationals for 20 years, and I'm still looking for a way to get back into it. I need to play seniors, which now seniors is 50 and above.
what?
But
What's
it,
open? I mean, open is open, but
open
you
is
have to.
open, right? But now
There's no
it's
other age break until 50, or is it? I
there
mean,
are.
math.
I
What
think
they
on the
call it?
women's side, maybe you can play 45s, but they don't even call you seniors until your 50s. And then if things start to happen, the net starts to come down after a certain number of years or whatever. But it sounds your story sounds exactly like every other team that I've ever heard of. You just run into people and say, "Hey, would you like to play with us?" And
Mhm.
there's all these teams that end up like that. I mean, you must just be amazed because I know in the early mid 80s that the adult nationals were a big tournament, but not huge. It was a couple of
But
hundred teams, right?
but the national team players would split up and join
They
other
would.
clubs.
Yeah,
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 and that's
yeah.
one
And
thing. I
that's
I met the '84 Olympic team in 1983 in Memphis,
hmm,
and some of the guys, I can't remember off the top of my head, some of the guys who were still in college, like the seniors in college, were, trying out for and maybe even making the team. I don't know that anybody popped onto the '84 team that hadn't been there for years already. But I met Karch in May of '83. That was the first NCAA Final Four I attended, and I had a press pass from USA Today. They didn't pay me anything. I said, "Hey, I'm going. Can I get a press pass?" Because I knew the sports editor, and he says, "Yeah, sure." So Chris Marlowe and oh gosh, who was John Tesh, who later on went on to
yeah,
Entertainment Tonight. I mean, he did all the minor sports for CBS. Like he did Tour de
yep.
France, and he was primarily he's a musician, and he did the background music and everything. So I met Marlowe, I mean, because I'd already met him a few weeks earlier. No, I met him later. Nationals was like 2 weeks later in Memphis. So I met all these guys the first weekend in May at Ohio State and got pictures. And who doesn't love pictures? It's like I'm providing a service that people really appreciate, and it's nice to be appreciated for that. Well, I'm not getting paid, so I was, a thank you or I love that picture. Like I took one of Alan Knight's son uh, Friday night against Long Island University, and he's reaching above the net and doing like a one-handed one set behind him. And his middle blocker came in and freaking crushed the ball and almost tore the net down. And the referee, Mike O'Connor, he's from the Carolinas. He looks at him, he calmly signals, net, and awards the point to Long Island University. And then he gets the giggles after that. But I
What's
said, "Oh,
your
this is a great picture," because it's not just your classic setting picture. And Alan loved it, and his wife loved it, and that's great. That's what I do. But
everything I hear about Alan? I've never met him, but everything I hear about him is that he's a really decent guy.
oh, he's
My question
terrific.
for you is, what knowing Karch or having met Karch at that time, spent a little time around him. what's your impression then versus now? Because we
He's
see the old clips of him, and there was some real fire at that point.
absolutely, yeah. Like
To
Alan even said, "Oh, it's like Karch tearing the net." No, no, no. The referee said, "Oh, it's like Karch trying to take out the referee by tearing the net down." Playing doubles, right?
yeah.
And uh, yeah, right now he's very dry. He's very stoic. And when you saw him say, "We want to go medal," it's like, huh? When he was interviewed after the Olympics, you just don't see that lately. You don't see that anymore. And yeah, he was pretty volatile back then. I didn't know him that well. I mean, his dad actually helped me, find a hotel to stay at when I wanted to go up to Santa Barbara. My cousin lives in LA, so I could stay with her when I went out there for spring break trips. And then Mason went up to Santa Barbara. I played a game on the beach against Kathy Gregory.
Oh man,
I don't even
that's
remember
cool.
who my partner was or her partner was, but I didn't embarrass myself, but I certainly got a lesson. The jumbo shrimp, the tomahawk chop to the deep corners. I'm going, excuse me, I can't play against that. I have no, I can barely walk on talk on the sand, much less try to deal with all of that stuff. So I really appreciate what beach players go through trying to run through the sand and get this ball or get up there and block. And I photographed the 96 Olympics. I just had $75 tickets for the gold medal matches and the semifinal matches, and
Wow.
stayed with a friend of mine who lived there. Now my brother lived there and he was covering the Olympics too, but I don't even think I saw him. Oh, he was in Centennial Park or whatever it was called, like 20 minutes before the bomb went off.
Us too.
But
We
yeah.
we were the same. We sat pretty much on the bench where the explosion happened, and we left because we were tired from the travel, and we woke up in the morning and had no idea what had
You didn't
happened.
see who put the bomb there?
No, it wasn't me.
It wasn't you. No. But I mean, I learned what I learned about volleyball. I learned from watching. Bless Coach Stolick for letting me hang out with him for however many years it was. I didn't do it when Sheikha was the coach, but I still continued to try to report. I had I got a photograph of Willie Hughes and an article that I wrote about him, being like part of a volleyball family, going from beach to indoor, when he was in the Washington Post of all places. Um, I think in 83, May of 83. Yeah, before, or 84, somewhere around there. I'd have to look up the article. But again, I'm stumbling all of this stuff. I didn't pay my dues. I wish, but my that English teacher turned me off of thinking I could write, but you can. Like I said
Yeah.
before, learn the parts of speech, learn their function in a sentence, and learn how to tell a story. And there's different ways of writing. Like I said, I'm a technical writer by profession, but what I'm doing now is journalism, because I translate articles written by scientists into stories for a general audience to appreciate. And the general audience primarily is uppity ups at the Pentagon who want to know that what they're spending their money on is worthwhile, because the Defense Threat Reduction Agency is a grant funding organization that sends out requests for proposals for better material for protective clothing, protective garments, better uh, uh, decontamination solutions for bio. And I work in the biochemical defense department. Um, Cleaning solutions for canines, uh, vaccines, treatments, like one shot that helps treat myriad um, bacteria, or bacteria and versus virus. So, and I didn't know anything about that. I mean, I got a Bachelor of Science degree in phys ed, but that's not what this stuff is all about.
But you learn how to write it, right? I mean, that's the thing. For me, in technical writing, my career changed maybe 10 or 12 years ago when I learned about John Gunning and the fog index and how to write more directly. And that just that vaulted my normal career. I don't know if my volleyball career changed much, but my normal writing career really changed significantly. So, I mean, just from your perspective as that sports writer, just that ability to give a little bit of the story to people and draw them in appears to be the big thing.
Tom Boswell, I mean, he's unique.
Yeah,
But, you don't have to care about golf or baseball or whatever he's writing about. He could draw you in. If once you started reading it, you would finish it and you would have such a connection and such an interest that, oh my God, I'm going to have to watch the finals of the Open tomorrow. And I usually use golf on Sundays to take a nap because I like that quiet droning in the background. That's perfect nap conditions. Um, but yeah, I'm Oh, it is frustrating, and especially with the scientific writing too, is because they write upside down. They
right,
build from, well, we did this and that and the other, and then we discovered this. Well, you got to put the we discovered this on the top
right.
in in
Yep.
a news article or an article that that deputy assistant director at the Defense Department wants to know, was that money spent successfully, wisely? Is it going to help us? How does it benefit the warfighter, the joint force, and eventually our citizens and our allies? Because, that's not just for the War Department. That will benefit everyone.
Well,
Why
I
should
say
I
it by
care? Hmm?
go. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, no, it's like, why should I care that um, Francisella tularensis survives in cold water in the winter? It's because you can get rabbit fever and it'll kill you if it goes untreated. People thought, oh, well, maybe I just get sick in the summer and the fall if, I come across these spores from a dead rabbit. But that bacterium can kill you in the winter too if you drink out of a pond, even if it's clear running water. Got to watch out for
Yeah,
that. That can
exactly.
help
I
everyone.
Yeah,
relate
but
it to I
you know,
relate it back to baseball articles all the time.
yeah.
For me, when you read a baseball article in a newspaper now on online, of course, because nobody gets a newspaper anymore. But when you get that baseball article, you find out what the turning point of the game was, what the
Mhm,
score was, where you stand in the playoffs. Those all happen in the very first paragraph. And
mhm,
then as a kid, it used to drive me crazy because they would bounce around. They'd talk about the fourth inning, where here's where the game changed. And then they go to the sixth inning, and then the second, and eventually you hear about in the ninth inning something minuscule happened. And like this all bounced around. It's all out of order, but it made so much sense because you want to hear the important stuff first.
mhm,
It's funny. I used to teach engineers, and one of and I work with executives now. When we talk about storytelling, I tell them, look, you probably at some time have led with your data. What I'm telling you is, don't lead with your data. Lead with your story, because there's a story in the head of your audience, and it's not the story you're telling them. And as they
right.
listen to your story, there's something else going on in their head, and it's not what you think it is. And if you give them your data, they will use your data in their story to confirm it. If you at least start with the story, you give yourself a fighting chance. And I was
Mhm,
illustrating some of this to my class one day, and I said, "Listen, here's the story. The story is that two players on a women's softball team took an action in the game that caused them to lose the game and not qualify for the NCAA's.
ooh,
And then I played the video from ESPN of the two softball players who picked up the kid who blew her knee out rounding first and
oh,
touched her foot to all the bases for her only home run in her career that won the game, essentially. And I go, okay, you really need to know the story. I get tears every time I think about that story, and it was so well told. Tom Rinaldi and his producer have told some great stories, and that was one of the best.
oh my goodness, I'm crying now. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
That's
but
writing.
I think yes, And like I said, a good writer can make any topic, any person interesting. And in my case, more interesting than I really am. But everybody's got stories. My dad, oh, this breaks my heart. My dad could tell great stories. And he got Alzheimer's dementia. And he would start to tell a story that, my brother and I have heard 100 times. But then to see his face just get blank, and he knew he had Alzheimer's, he knew he had a reason why he couldn't remember. And it was so sad and so frustrating. But I bought a Sirius XM radio. I kept the subscription in my 2010 Ford Escape. Not only did I like it, it was expensive, but it was worth it for when I drove out and picked up my dad and we drove to lunch or just drove around so we could listen to the 40s channel on Sirius XM radio. And he knew every word to every
Yeah.
song they played on that channel. And he was a
Long-term
musician.
memory.
Yes, yes, and music and live music too. My brother would bring his keyboard up to my dad's retirement place and he would take it around to the different wards, like the dementia ward or the long-term care ward, and they would roll people's beds up so they could hear him better where he was set up in a central area. And his girlfriend was looking at this one lady in bed and her toes were tapping under the sheet. Kathy goes, "Oh, look at that." And the nurse goes, "She never moves. She never moves." And it was the live music that got through to her.
Former dancer.
Maybe,
She's
or
a
just
she's the
someone who just, the vibes just got through to her. And
yeah.
so, yeah, Dad, um, yeah, he passed away in 2016. But he
Hmm.
had polio when he was a kid, and he didn't know he'd had it. His parents didn't tell him why, that flu and the fact that he was, like
Yeah.
moving very well or able to move very well. I don't know how the heck he got into the Army Air Corps, but he did. And he trained at 20 different bases all over the United States in less than a year or 2 years. And his paperwork was always several weeks behind him. So he's just a couple weeks short of getting shipped to Japan with Jimmy Doolittle, and his paperwork finally caught up to him. And the doctor said, "You can't be deployed." He was training as a right wing gunner on a B 16. He'd even gotten caught in the belly turret during a training exercise with the door open, and he had to straddle himself across the opening to keep from falling out until the plane landed. It's one of the stories he could tell. But so he got grounded, and they put him in the band, and he played bass. And then he played keyboard. My grandfather had a Hammond B3, and I grew up playing a Hammond B3 too, and I couldn't do it now. I can barely turn the organ on, but so yeah, so it's he could tell stories, but then losing the ability to tell them just really, really crushed him. But my brother and I are always grateful that he knew who he and I were, because like I said, Willie Hughes's mom got it and she didn't recognize him. And she goes like, "Who are you? What are you
Yeah.
doing in my room?" And oh my God, that's heartbreaking. That's heartbreaking.
Yeah, that's rough. Hey, we only have limited time left, and I didn't want to spend a lot of time on this because I would like to get Hossack on here, maybe even both of them. But how are you with George Mason, the men's volleyball nowadays? How are you touching base with them, and what do you think about what's going on there?
Well, I go to every game. Uh, I donate a little bit of cash. Don't have a lot, so I'm a booster. And this year went to the fundraiser. Well, I'm proud of what I did last year. They had a live auction for a guest coach, where you could sit on the bench with the coach. You could attend the chalk talk. You could have, like pregame dinner with the guys. And so somebody started off like, 1,100, 1,200, 1,300. I think I got it up to 1,700. And no, somebody else got it up to 1,700 or whatever. And I said, what the heck? I can afford it. Maybe I can just drive the price up. So I jumped the price from 1,600 to $2,000. And everybody goes, ooh. Oh. And then somebody else who was an alumnus said, $2,100. And I let him have it because he was a player. He
Good job
graduated in
done.
music, whatever. I got that extra $400. Okay, but this year I decided, dang it, I'm gonna win the guest coach. So I only had to pay out 1,700. But the guy who had bid 1,600, Jay wisely said, "Oh, you can be guest coach too." So rather than only get the 1,700, he's get the 1,700 plus the 1,600. So smart. So I picked
Right.
UCLA, and we do
Yeah.
that on Tuesday, the January 31st. So I'm looking forward to that. But I'm kind of like a mom on the team that doesn't have any of the kids, and I'm friends. Become friends with the parents. We have pre-game lunches or dinners at various restaurants around Fairfax before the matches, and Facebook friends with most of them. So, and they appreciate my photographs, and I donate them when I can.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Take a tax deduction. It's a legitimate donation to the university is an eligible institution. They are still using my pictures of Uvaldo Acosta and Moyo Kasim and Rick Lucas in their team media guides. No one else took those pictures. No one else was on those road trips to take those pictures. Some of
Right.
them were from in the Lynn Gym, but a lot of them were on the road. So there, and I was just looking at a box of pictures that I have that are from the '80s, and dang, they still look good. I fixed those Sons of Guns really well because they haven't faded. They haven't turned brown. They look really good. And I have pictures of Karch that he signed for me. One picture I got of Karch during the USA Cup, it was either 80, I think it was 84. And we're at Springfield College, and we're playing Russia or Cuba or France or Italy, one of the four. Um, and I just had my camera, and again, it was film camera and it had slide film in it, and it was down here, and I'm sitting like right on the edge of the court, and I have probably even a 50 millimeter lens. I'm so close to the court, and then Karch is receiving a serve, and he's diving because it's a short serve, and he's diving to get the ball, and I just went, "Oh crap!" and I went click, and it came out great. Dusty Dvorak's in the left back position. You can see him getting ready. Aldis Berzins is to Karch's left, and this is like the one serve receive usually where Karch serve passed from the right. Almost all other serve receives they worked it out, so he passed from the left. But he's got one foot on still on the court, and he's diving forward, and his arms, the ball's just maybe a few inches above his hands, and his other leg is splayed out behind him. I made it a poster, and I found him, and he signed it for me. So it's downstairs on the wall.
Ah, that's cool.
But yeah,
Yeah,
so
memories like that are.
and again, I paid my own way. Oh, I think one of those trips they let me ride on the bus um, back from New York. So I had a wad of pictures in my pocket, and I was sitting in the front seat, and one or two of the players, they'd come up and sit next to me and look through all the pictures. That was fun.
Well, we teased this earlier, and it's a good thing to finish on. I think you need to tell one or two Tom Selleck stories.
Oh, okay. So here I am. It's '83. We drove to Memphis in the station wagon with not the players because they went on an official. They went in a van, and then us stragglers went in a car. And I knew he was going to be there. I absolutely love Magnum, and I was taking pictures of Outrigger, and I had a little plastic 3-ring binder of photographs, mostly volleyball photographs, and they were having breakfast someplace. And I said, "Hi, I'm Diane. I took pictures. I've got some of you. I have to get them developed, but this is some of the pictures I've taken in the Washington, D.C. area." And I just dropped it off at the table. It was, John Stanley and Tom Madison and all the outrigger canoe guys. And I had to go to the bathroom. So I went to the bathroom and came back. And Tom and they said, "Hey, these are really good." And I said, "Oh, thank you. But, if I get something, I'd be glad to share them with you." And so I think I got the address of his uh, production office in Hawaii. And then one of the one of the games in the Memphis field house, I was sitting underneath the referee stand. I got permission from like, hey, can I sit under here? Because, I wasn't going to be, nobody was going to be able to get a ball from where I was sitting anyway, right, in that spot. So, of course, all the girls, the ladies in the Memphis area are there with their hair all done up, makeup, dressed to the nines, trying to watch the game, not knowing anything about volleyball. I thought it was hysterical. And, they were kind of prepared for that. But Tom made a perfect pass to Dave Shoji. And as he turned around, I caught his eye and I just said, nice pass. And he said, thanks. So, we just got this tiny little connection going. And I got a pair of Navy still had a varsity team back then. So I got a pair of navy blue shorts that had navy and gold printed on the leg. And I wrapped up a bunch of slides that I had duplicated and some proof sheets and stuff and pictures and mailed it to the production office in Hawaii. I never heard back. And like 2 years later, somebody, his bodyguard or something, was telling me, what are you asking money for him for? What are you doing this? What are you doing? And he said he was going to pay me. He said. So, eventually I did get like $200 for that. But his bodyguard guy was, it's my job to keep people like you away from him. And I'm going, yeah, I don't think so. Not me. Not me, because he wants what I have to offer him. He told me, he said, I never see any pictures of myself playing except maybe in a newspaper. So these were probably some of the first pictures of him playing that he ever had. And then his son Kevin was playing at USC later in the 80s. And, I met him, I think the first time I met him was at UCLA when he was there watching, and I introduced myself and we started talking and we became really good friends. And I'd call him on the phone. Sometimes I'd go over and chat with him in his apartment that he shared with Nick. What was Nick's name? Played on the 92 team. He was an outside hitter. And then he won, the national, he won at George Mason. In 1990, we hosted Final Four, and USC was the wild card team, which really pissed off UCLA, but USC had beaten them twice during the regular season, and UCLA didn't win the MPSF tournament. So it was Ball State, Rutgers, Newark beat Penn State out of the East. That was unusual. And then Ball State and USC and Long Beach won. So USC got the wild card. So it was Rutgers, Newark, Ball State, Long Beach, which is where I met Alan briefly. And USC. So I'm helping out on the press table again. I'm sitting on the press table taking pictures. And then I was doing the all tournament team. But after the semifinals, USC played Ball State, and I got the pictures. They're color prints, so I got them. The 1 hour whatever. Got a couple of duplicate sets, and found Tom up in the stands prior to the finals. And again, people are trying to stop me from reaching him. And I said, "Hey, Tom, I got pictures." He says, "Oh, come on over." And I hand him a bunch of pictures of Kevin, and he pulls a wad of cash out of his pocket and peels off some bills. I charge him like $2 a print. It's just as much as it costs to have it made, right? I'm not going to try to grift him or anything, but I probably could have gotten $5 a print. I don't know. And then his Kevin's mom came,
cool.
and yeah. So and then pictures from the finals I was able to mail to his publicist, Esme Shanley, and so they sent me back a check for some more. So we're not buddies or anything. And then but prior to that, in '88, SC and was it Santa Barbara and Mason and Ball State. So Mason played Ball State and it went 5. It was huge. And then SC was warming up. Oh, no, that was the third place match. So prior to that, Mason lost to Santa Barbara. And if it was Santa Barbara, I think it was Santa Barbara. And SC beat Ball State. But Kevin came up to me and said, prior to the finals, when they're going to warm up prior to the finals matches, that if I put on my uniform and hit during warm-ups, could you get some pictures of me? So this is in 88, this prior. And I said, sure. So I'm sitting there, I'm taking some pictures of Kevin, during warm-ups, and 1 hour place, got them printed up. After, I couldn't give them to them at the tournament because still had to get them printed. And Tom later that summer was making a movie in Baltimore. And I found out where the production office was in Baltimore, and I mailed 4 or 5 pictures of Kevin up to there and hoped that, Tom got them. And I later found out he did. He carried them with him everywhere. Later, after the film finished, and he went to England. His wife, Jilly, is from England, and he was showing them to his in-laws. That's just crazy. And then 1990, I was able to see him. In 85, I saw him. I took more pictures, but the lighting at Nationals, it was either the Hofstra Fieldhouse or Nassau Community College. I don't remember. I think it was Hofstra. But the lighting was horrible, and I didn't get anything. But I met his Jilly there. I met Jilly originally in 83 because, this is hysterical. You'll love this story. You got to hear this. Okay, so Tom is making a movie in England called Lassiter. Prior to that, he has to sign papers saying he's not going to do anything that could risk him being injured. But he had the excuse of being invited to Bob Hope's 80th birthday special that was being filmed at the Kennedy Center in Washington. So he could fly to DC. I mean, he took a long weekend or whatever. He played on Thursday in Memphis, had to go back to DC and do the Bob Hope thing on Friday, and then he came back and played in the semifinals and finals that Outrigger won of the men's seniors. And nobody was the wiser back in England, the production staff or whatever.
Can you imagine it today with social media? No chance.
Oh yeah, that wouldn't last long. That wouldn't fly. No. I love that story.
No way.
And so I was talking.
We're beyond our hour.
I could talk with Tom Madison and Dave Show, John Stanley, and all these guys. And they played a match against I don't remember the name of it. I don't think it was Mavericks, but it might have been. Tom Tate, who's coach at Penn State, played against Outrigger in the Memphis State Fieldhouse. And I got some pictures of Tate, blocking Selleck, and he loved it. And he bought like an 11x14 print of it and had it hanging in his office. And his story was he blocked him. Yeah, right, Tom. That's okay. That's not it.
I would love to just see that picture.
I got it somewhere. I'll find it.
Yeah, you need a photo book.
I wouldn't say hero, but I just love Tate. Yeah.
I have so many photos scattered all over the place, and somewhere around here I have a film and slide scanner that I need to get all this stuff that's physical into digital, but I've been taking pictures since March of 1982.
Yeah.
Almost every home match. Not
amazing.
I don't think there's 2 home matches that I did not attend for George Mason.
Amazing history.
Well, really appreciate
Steve,
you taking your time
hour.
today. Yeah, no,
Sorry.
Nope. Yep. I'm happy you were able to join us, and this, it's important to really reflect on how we got where we got here, and you've got a lot of that history kind of stored there and have captured a lot of it. So it's kind of fun, and I don't think people think of Tom Selleck or other people as being involved, or can have a conversation with some of these guys who you came up with as players who are now coaches or even retired coaches that have influenced the game.
And I'm filming their sons. I'm photographing their sons.
Grandkids are next.
Yeah. Oh my word! If I'm still here, the Tonight Show actually emailed me saying, "Hey, we hear you have pictures of Tom Selleck, and could you send us some that we might show when he's on this episode?" And I spent like 3 hours trying to scan in better images because, you know, the pictures I took, which were good in the 80s, are grainy and ugh,
Yeah.
looking, you know, by today's standards. But I sent them like 3 pictures. One of them was him wiping up the floor in Memphis because, you know, you had to wipe up your own sweat. And then probably the one against Tom Tate, maybe, you know, where
Yep.
he hit it past the block, Tom. And then another one. But they never used him.
Yeah.
And I could have gotten 175 bucks a piece if they had used him. But I'm thinking, Tom, sorry, yeah, okay. He probably wants to keep volleyball to himself
Yeah.
and not make it a. So they could still tell the same story of that cutout on Three Men and a Baby that's hiding behind the curtain and looks like a ghost. I don't know. That's what
Yeah.
they went with.
Well, thanks for being with us,
Oh, thanks for
and
having
thanks
me.
for the time last night. That was a really good opportunity to kind of get to know you a little bit and get to preview some of this stuff. So that was really, I appreciate the time. BJ,
Oh,
you
well,
got
thank you
anything
so
before we go?
I don't. No, thank you so much, Diane. It was great to meet you, and I'm looking forward to digging into some of the history that you have and seeing if I can get some of those seasonal shots.
Yeah, see if you can. If you haven't seen the video about Uvaldo Acosta, Brian Negron, who was the setter at Mason for several years, a couple years ago, did it as a project. He's a videographer and does sports coverage now. Just Google Uvaldo Acosta on YouTube, and you can see that. And that'll be. And then hopefully, hey guys, try to make it out in May. George Mason's hosting again after however many years it's been since 1990.
Yeah.
33 years. And there will be 4 days of matches. There'll be a play-in, and then two
I'm
matches,
looking at that. I am
and
looking
then
at it now.
semis, and then the final. And the tickets are really reasonable. So you got April 30th, May 2nd, 4th, and 6th at Mason.
Great. Well, we will be back in the green room after we go, if you want to hang for a minute or two just to say goodbye before we go. But I'm going to say goodbye to the folks who are watching and folks who are re-listening to this. The podcast will be out soon, and we're out of here.